Okay, so occultations of Regulus by asteroids, especially by the 134-kilometer 268 Adorea on 2016 October 13. So it's actually the 14th, morning of the 14th local time. Next slide. Um, the first time there was an occultation predicted by Regulus was by the asteroid Rhodope on 2005, October 19th, and this just shows the prediction. The path went over southern Iberia, over southern Portugal and southern Spain. It also passed over Italy in starting a morning twilight and then brighter morning twilight over near Athens, Greece. And the occultation was actually observed at all those locations. Um, uh, I flew out I flew to Madrid and joined with an observer there, and we were going to try to deploy a few telescopes out. I had sort of a version of the Mighty Mini. It was just a telephoto lens with an image intensifier that gave a wide field of view. Um, and a camcorder and a couple of other telescopes. And I got Arturo, the fellow I was with, to run one of the telescopes, and then I was going to run a couple of others. So anyway, we had some cloud problems, but managed to get I actually got a recording with I used this telephoto lens system, ran it as a remote station, and then I drove about 11 kilometers away and just put the camcorder up on the car roof and recorded a miss there. But the other station got the occultation near the southern. The next slide. And this just shows all the chords on it. You know, most of the chords were visual with those days, but Daryl and I got a chord from southern Portugal, and my chord was here. There was someone else. Rui Goncalves was sort of in the same area, and then this is my miss observation here. And so it's not a very large asteroid, and of course our cameras weren't real sensitive and everything. The one interesting thing about Regulus, and we didn't know it in 2005, but around that time some astronomers discovered that Regulus has a companion, some sort of white dwarf or something pretty small, um, and but they could see from the more accurate radial velocity measurements that they were getting then that the lines of Regulus were shifting. Regulus is also an interesting star because it's rotating almost so fast that it would fly apart if it were rotating much faster. And so it's very oblate, ellipsoid from the rotation, and the polar regions then are brighter than the equatorial regions because of the less gravity at the equatorial regions. So it'd be interesting to get a resolution across the disk of Regulus, and if you had a really sensitive camera, if you could really go deep, might see this companion, which is estimated to be anywhere between 6th and 13th magnitude, probably closer to the fainter end. But no one's gotten a really good occultation. This one system with a telephoto lens, I was only seeing like 4th magnitude stars. Uh, so um, anyway, let's go to the next one. This just shows the next opportunity was in 2014, March 20th, where the path went right over New York City and Bermuda. And, of course, this is part of the path in the Northeast. And IOTA had this huge campaign for it. Ted, you were instrumental in that. Next slide. So anyway, the whole northeastern U.S. was covered with clouds. It was really sad that people flew from Japan to try to observe it, and in Germany, right, and people were trying to run under the clouds, and there were a few breaks, but no one was able to get under them, and so. So it ended up as a bust, and I decided last minute I could see that it looked like a little better conditions in Bermuda, even though it was the northern edge of the path was over the island, and so it was uncertain which way it would shift. And I was hoping it would shift that way, and we would get hits. And so I ran. Somehow these things shifted. I was at Horseshoe Bay where I did my attendant station, and I had a hotel up in this area, and Tim Haynes, one of the observers from the UK was there. I got the same place that he stayed at, and so I set up in the patio. I set up a maxi there, and hoping that we could record the companion, and showed him how to do it. Well, it turned out it was so cloudy he turned on the equipment, although it looked like it was completely hopeless, and he couldn't get anything. He couldn't get onto the star because he couldn't see it, because of the thick clouds that came over. But my pre-pointed telescope, Maxi, recorded the star passing through, and there was no occultation. And Hal Povenmire also came out here, and he was actually at a cape that was just a little bit east, another mile east into the path than I was, and he visually saw no occultation also. And I had a couple of other stations farther east across the island in case the path shifted east, but for different reasons they didn't work. But I got the two definite misses, and unfortunately, this just didn't. No one got a positive anywhere. So next slide.
David, when Joe Rayo, the weatherman for Channel 5, he doesn't usually do 5-year weather projections, but he says when he saw this path was going to go right over his house, he knew 5 years in advance it was going to be a cloud.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah, and this just shows the cell phone app for timing and reporting the occultations that you and others worked on so that potentially millions of people could have used their cell phones to observe this occultation. And I tried to kind of get people interested in doing that for the Aldebaran grays, and I sent out messages to a couple of the major newspapers and to colleges and all these small towns along the path, and to all the planetaria and to astronomy clubs. And the only bite I got was from the Tulsa Astronomy Club, which had already known about the event from Sky and Telescope. And
we notified the Tulsa World and gave them your email and
right.
the whole stuff. They didn't
Right. And as we were driving, to Childress, we heard this thing talking, a very short thing from the University of Texas, astronomy of the day thing talking, and a special thing is going to happen tomorrow night. It says every month the moon gets close to Aldebaran. Well, it turns out tonight it's going to get really close. And then she did say there was going to be an actual occultation of the star, and said how it would disappear on the bright side and reappear on the dark side, and just said that there was a line extending, from where did she say? From Ohio to Texas, and that's all she described the path as, Ohio to Texas. And if you were north of the path, you wouldn't see the occultation. If you were south of it, you would see an occultation lasting anywhere from a couple of minutes to an hour. And that's all she said. She didn't mention anything that if you were really in this narrow path, you would see all this neat stuff and everything. Yeah, so I was a little bit disappointed in that she didn't read Sky and Telescope and say something about that or whatever. So anyway, the next Regulus event that we tried was the Dagmar occultation, which Paul has talked about, where we made the side trip to Indonesia. I also mentioned it last year, so just a recap then. Next slide shows the path for that event, and Paul had talked about the 6 stations they ran in near Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. We tried it at the other end of the path here, way down over here. And next slide, I think, shows the, it was just under 4 degrees. and this is in a tropical climate, so this shows the Jeddah area. This is where Paul was, um, and, um, and so he got a good recording of it anyway. But it was with a mighty mini, which can get down to about 9th magnitude or so. So I guess you didn't see the companion event in the video. Next. But it might be interesting to analyze your video to see if there might be anything there, but I think Brad has already looked at it fairly closely. Next slide. And this just shows the situation on the coast of Sumatra, where the path just cut across southern Sumatra, and so on the west coast we were at this just 4 degrees altitude, and we actually set up 3 stations, one here, one in Bengkulu, about where the O is here, and then my station was actually down here at the port of Bengkulu, where they ship out a lot of coal to China and different places. But Joan's recording, there's no evidence at all of the star ever. It's just completely, there was some low clouds in the west. It was mostly clear but hazy, quite very hazy, and but there were some clouds low down that obviously the star was behind and completely blocked. And at my recording here, you can actually see Regulus enter the star field. We were using the moon to pre-point because we could see the moon through the muck, but and the moon passed through about 40 minutes before the occultation, and my recording recorded the star down to about 6 degrees altitude, and then you just couldn't follow it anymore. Tony George tried to analyze the tape, but there was nothing in it. But Wira Hadruputrian, who was the Indonesian astronomer who traveled with us on this and helped us at every stage, making all the arrangements, getting cars so we could do this deployment and everything, and he could see it, that Regulus was entering, something was entering the field view, but he really didn't tell what happened. But the conditions were slightly better where he was, and the star actually did record through the center of the field of view. And Tony George did his remarkable analysis and actually managed to find the event, an occultation that happened there. So the next slide then shows Paul Maley's and Wira's chords. This is Paul's chord and this is Wira. So we actually got some data out of this. So, and thank for Tony George and Roti, which you read about, it's sort of, arcane to some of you all that was going on there, but it really proved its worth for this event. So,
David, may I remark on the antithesis of what we do?
Mm-hmm.
You talk about an occultation. Normally we want to see the size of the asteroid.
Yeah.
You remarked we'd like to see something about Regulus.
That's right.
Now, we use 30 frame per second cameras here.
Right.
Okay, I come from the bomb data. How about a fast transient photomultiplier looking at nanosecond resolution on an oscilloscope? Okay, and so to map Regulus,
right,
any tiny little rock going past should show up as a dip, right?
Yes.
This is the upside down of what we do. Am I crazy?
Yeah.
How big do you need? Because it doesn't cover much of Regulus.
Yeah, Regulus sub-10s at the asteroid belt, I don't know, sub-10s maybe 100 meters or 50 meters or something like that.
Pretty big on it.
Yeah.
Okay,
So.
I guess one needs to do that algebra. Excuse me, you just
Oh, yeah. Well, that's one thing we are interested in, trying to do some bright events with high-speed recorders. Especially lunar events are easier to do that way, but with asteroid events too. And I think you were going to try the Origone event with something better than just 30 frames a second, weren't you, Steve?
Oh, yeah.
Right. So yeah, we could have done something like that. So we hope. Right, right, yeah, yeah. So, okay. Anyway, so let's go to the next one. This just shows photos of.
Can you go back one slide?
Oh, okay, yeah,
Okay, the really bad thing about this is that the prediction was absolutely dead on.
yeah.
I guess if I'd had an indication that the prediction was gonna be so good, I would have brought in those 4 observers on
Hmm.
the outer fringes, so we could have at least had a chance of getting additional data, but I didn't expect anything like this.
No, no, no. The prediction error. You saw the prediction map. This was like a rank 60 event or something like that. So you did have to spread out to be sure. Once we get Gaia and get the asteroids better pinned down, then we can do just what you said. We're sort of stuck at the moment. So okay, let's go on. So this just shows. This is at Lyra's site, the Mighty Mini we were using, and you could see the black cardboard that we pasted in front, or black piece of paper. I mean, we just taped that in front, and this shows Jones set up with the driver there, and this is a Jones. The rain off, right? Yeah. And this shows the site where she was. It was a very nice site along the beach there, but unfortunately, right. Yeah, they were up on the bluff up there. Yeah. Okay, well, here's the event coming up, though, on October 13th this year, and here is the path. Nice wide path, so it has a high rank. I forget it's, rank 98 or something like that. Yeah, so it's a quite certain event, um, and um, and you can see the path is crossing Latangui Island. I think after I wrote this, the path has shifted a little bit north, so that the center of the path goes over this island. This area is also known as New Ireland, but Latanga is the Papua New Guinea word. All this area here is part of Papua New Guinea. The next slide, and this just shows the path over Papua New Guinea, and there's the center line, and the blue lines are the predicted limits, and the red lines is the 1 sigma limits. So half of Latangui Island is in it. This is another island here, and it's hard to get between the two, but there is a road right along the east side of Latangui Island where we need it to the asteroids rising in the east. Next slide. And there are daily flights from Port Moresby to I forget the name of this town. It doesn't show up very well. Kadena or something like that. It's not that, but there's daily air service there, and Joan and I have reservations to go there. And anyone else interested, you could come along. But there is a road going the full length of the island here, and the island is about 300 kilometers long, but we don't need to cover that. We're just going to try to cover some of the area here, and we will. Of course, Regulus is bright enough to use Mighty Minis, and so we're going to try to run maybe about 6 stations. We're not going to try any more than that, but also before the event, we planned to go to Australia, spend a couple of weeks in Australia, and it turned out the best flights are to Brisbane, in terms of schedule, to fly into Brisbane rather than Sydney. And so we'll stay there and we'll see John Broughton. And I'm going to I have back several years ago, a few years ago, I ordered 3 10-inch mirrors, and one of them were put in the first suitcase telescope that John Broughton shipped to me. And I sent it on to Bruce Berger, who, right. So, okay, great. So that was, and the other 2 mirrors were just sitting at my, well, they were sitting in Bruce Berger's place, and I got them at NEAF. He gave them to me finally, and so I have them. And when we came back from Australia, when we went to Australia, I had told John Broughton we were coming, and I'd like to get could you build me a suitcase telescope. And he says, okay. And I found a 10-inch mirror in Australia. It was one of the few, and I ordered it and had it sent to John. And so when we got to Brisbane, soon after we arrived in Australia, he had this nice suitcase telescope, and that's what we used in Alice Springs, during our trip there. And I brought it back home with me, so I've got it, but I still have these two mirrors. And so, but he built a second, the hardware for a second suitcase telescope. So I brought the hardware for the second scope as well as the first one that had the Australian mirror. And so when I got home, it turned out the mirrors were slightly different sizes. I had to swap them between the two scopes, but that worked. And so now I have two 10-inch suitcase telescopes. And so what I'm going to do though on this trip is I'm going to take my other mirror, and John Broughton has come up with a new design for the suitcase telescope that incorporates some of this alt mount idea to the suitcase telescope design, which should make it a little bit easier to use. So I would like to get another one of those, or he's built only one so far, and so if I can get another one, then I'll take the mirror so he can put it in, and then we're going to take it to here and try to record the Regulus occultation and get that companion, using an integrated camera, so that we get. But one unfortunate aspect, though, is this is in the equator, and the intertropical convergence zone is right over the equator at this time of year, which is near the equinox, and so I think our chances are pretty small of actually having clear enough sky to observe it. But there is a chance, and so we want to take it. And of course, we can go up and down the island to try to find some clear sky if we'll see. Next slide. This whole area, New Ireland was first settled. That area was first settled as a German colony in the 19th century. I mean, actually, it was first settled by the Melanesians 4,000 years ago or so. but the Germans then had a colony there, and of course, when they lost World War I, they were kicked out, and the island, the area was given to Australia. And so Australians started to put some infrastructure there. World War II came along. The Japanese, bombed the place and everything. The Australians, most of them left the island. About 30 of Australians remained on the island, and most of them were killed by the Japanese. So in the place, this town was devastated by the Japanese, but they did build a military airport there, and that airport is still used, now. But the place is a nice place, and Australian tourists go there, fairly frequently. It's a great surfing spot, so you can see the right. So there are some nice places there, and a lot of the people speak English from the Australians' influence. So we will see. It'll be an interesting experience. I hope the sky's like this and not like that. So I think that's the last slide.